I always believed my life was perfect. I had a good job, a kind husband, and a home filled with warmth. People said I was lucky. I thought so too. Until the day everything changed. It started on a quiet Sunday morning when sunlight spilled through the window and the sound of the city hummed softly outside. I made breakfast and waited for Daniel to wake up. He had been distant lately. He said work was stressful and I believed him. But that morning, something inside me felt uneasy. He left his phone on the table while taking a shower. It buzzed once, then again. I glanced at it without meaning to. The name on the screen froze me. It was saved as Claire from office. I knew her. She was his colleague. I remembered the way he spoke about her with that polite tone hiding a spark in his eyes. My hand trembled. I told myself not to open the phone. I told myself to trust him. But curiosity and fear pushed me closer. The screen unlocked easily. My heart raced. The messages were short but sharp like glass. She wrote that she missed him. He replied with words that once belonged to me. I felt my chest tighten. My world tilted. I wanted to scream, but I just stood there staring at the screen while the sound of the shower echoed from the bathroom. The man I thought I knew was a stranger. When he came out, I smiled, pretending everything was fine. My voice shook as I asked him about his plans for the day. He kissed my forehead and said he had a meeting. He left quickly. I sat there in silence, unable to move. I read those messages again and again until the letters blurred. My hands were cold. My mind raced with questions. Why? Since when? What did I do wrong? The hours passed slowly. I kept hearing his voice in my head, repeating every promise he ever made. I tried to convince myself it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was overthinking. But deep down, I knew the truth had already begun to unfold. That night he returned home with a calm smile. He talked about work, about dinner, about a new project he was excited about. I nodded, but my heart was not listening. I could see the lies hiding behind his eyes. I could see how easily he spoke them. When he fell asleep, I stared at him for a long time. The man beside me looked peaceful, as if he carried no guilt. My tears slipped quietly onto the pillow. I whispered to myself that maybe tomorrow I would wake up and it would all be a bad dream. But deep inside, I knew tomorrow would only bring more pain. As the city lights flickered outside, I made a silent promise. I would find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt, because lies do not stay buried forever. The next morning, I woke up before Daniel. I watched him sleeping beside me and felt a strange emptiness. The man who once made me feel safe now filled me with doubt. I moved quietly to the kitchen and made coffee, but my hands shook so much that I spilled some on the counter. My heart felt heavy. My mind was racing through every moment we had shared. I wanted to believe this was a mistake, but the image of those messages would not leave me. When Daniel left for work, I sat at the table staring at my phone. I opened social media and found Claire's profile. She had posted a photo 2 weeks ago at a restaurant that Daniel and I used to visit. I looked closer and noticed the reflection in the glass behind her. A man's hand was visible on the table. It looked like his. My throat tightened. I scrolled further and found another post from a late evening at a hotel lounge. Same watch. Same shirt pattern. The truth was right there, hiding in plain sight. I felt anger rise inside me, but it was mixed with sadness. I had built my life around him. Every dream, every plan. And now it was all falling apart. I decided I needed proof. I started keeping track of his late nights, the phone calls he took in the other room, the new cologne he wore, the lies he wrapped in calm explanations. I listened quietly and remembered everything. One evening he said he had to work late again. I nodded and waited. After he left, I called his office pretending to ask about a project. His colleague told me he had taken a few days off. My heart stopped for a moment. I asked where he was. She said she thought he was out of town. I thanked her and hung up. The silence in the room grew louder. I knew then that he was with Harry, drove that night without knowing where I was going. The city lights blurred as I tried to stop crying. I pulled over near the river and sat there staring at the dark water. My reflection looked like a stranger. I asked myself what went wrong. I had been loyal, patient, forgiving. Yet somehow I was the one left in the shadows. I felt both weak and strong at the same time. Weak because I still loved him. Strong because I finally saw the truth. When I returned home, he was already there. He smiled and asked where I had been. I said I went for a drive. He nodded and kissed my cheek. I could smell the perfume that was not mine. I wanted to shout at him, but I stayed silent. My silence was my shield now. I needed time to plan. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind. Every lie, every touch, every word. I realized how easily people can wear masks. He had been planning this life while pretending to love me. I wondered if Claire knew about me, or if he had told her stories to make himself the victim. Either way, I decided I would not let him destroy me quietly. In the morning I went to work, pretending nothing was wrong. My friends noticed my pale face, but I smiled and said I was just tired. Inside I was breaking, but I refused to show it. I had spent too long being the quiet wife who forgave too easily. That woman was gone now. After work, I went to the cafe near Daniel's office and waited in my car. At sunset, I saw him walk out. He was not alone. Claire was beside him laughing. They looked happy, like nothing in the world could touch them. I watched as he opened the car door for her, the same way he used to do for me. The sight cut deep. I took a deep breath and started my engine, but I didn't follow them. Not yet. I needed to think. That night I stared at my reflection again and whispered that he had made his choice. Now it was my turn. I didn't know what revenge looked like yet, but I knew justice was coming. I could feel it rising inside me like a quiet storm, waiting for the right moment to break. Days passed and I became calm on the surface, but inside my heart was burning. I no longer waited for Daniel to come home early. I no longer asked him questions. I played my part carefully. I smiled when he spoke and nodded when he lied. He believed I was still blind, but I was wide awake now. I started to collect every piece of truth that would expose him, checked our shared bills, and found charges from hotels and restaurants I had never been to. I quietly took photos of them and saved them on a hidden drive. I gathered screenshots of messages and the photos from Claire's social media. Each piece of evidence was a step toward justice. Every secret he thought he buried was slowly becoming my weapon. At work, I kept my focus sharp. My boss noticed the change and said I looked stronger. I told him I was just learning to let go of things that hurt me. That evening, I went home and watched Daniel typing on his laptop. I asked softly if he wanted dinner. He smiled and said he had already eaten with colleagues. I nodded. My heart was silent. I went to the bedroom and looked at our wedding photo on the wall. The smiles in that frame looked like ghosts now. One weekend, I told Daniel that my friend was hosting an art event, and I had to help. In truth, I went to meet a lawyer. I needed to understand my rights. I wanted to end this marriage, but I wanted to do it smartly. The lawyer listened and said that evidence of betrayal would help my case. I thanked him and left with a strange sense of power. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control again. That night, Daniel returned home late. His shirt was wrinkled and his phone was buzzing again. He turned it face down on the table and said he was tired. I smiled gently and said he should rest. He looked surprised by my calmness but said nothing. He did not know that every calm word I spoke was part of my plan. Over the next few days, I started preparing my move. I gathered all the proof in one file and sent copies to myself. Then I created a small anonymous account online. I uploaded the photos and messages, but I did not post them yet. I waited. Timing mattered. I wanted him to feel the same fear he had given me. On a Friday evening, he told me he had a business dinner. I watched him dress up carefully. The same cologne again. The same lies wrapped in soft tones. As soon as he left, I followed quietly. My heart was steady. My mind clear. I parked near the hotel he always used for meetings. I waited for 30 minutes. Then I saw him walk in with Claire by his side. They laughed like the world belonged to them. I took photos from a distance, clear and undeniable. Then I left before they could see me. I went home and sat in the dark. I felt both pain and relief. Pain because it was true. Relief because now I had the final piece. I opened my laptop and sent an email to Daniel from the anonymous account. The subject said only one line: I know everything. The message contained the photos. I imagined his face when he opened it. The confusion, the fear, the realization that his lies were no longer safe. My phone rang an hour later. It was him. I didn't answer. I let it ring again and again until he stopped. He came home late that night. His face pale, his voice shaking. He asked if I had seen anything strange. I looked at him and said no. He stared at me, searching for a clue, but I gave him none. He said he was being blackmailed by someone, and I had to trust him. I nodded. Inside, I smiled quietly. Justice had started its work. Over the next few days, he grew restless. He checked his phone constantly. He barely ate. Claire stopped posting online. I could see the fear spreading between them. It felt strange to watch him unravel. I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive. Then one morning he received an email at work. It was from the anonymous account again. The same photos, but this time they were sent to his manager too. I watched him rush home in panic. He shouted, asking who could have done it. I said maybe truth has a way of finding those who try to bury it. He froze at my words, his eyes filled with shock. For the first time I saw guilt break through his mask. That night he slept on the couch. I went to bed alone. My heart was quiet. I had not forgiven him, but I had taken back my power. I knew this was only the beginning. I still had one final step. A way to end everything once and for all. A way to make sure he never forgot what it felt like to betray someone who truly loved him. The morning after his panic, everything felt still. The sky outside was gray and heavy, as if it carried my silence. Daniel barely spoke. He sat at the table staring at his phone while pretending to scroll through messages. I could see the fear in his eyes. He had lost the calm that once made him confident. Every lie he told had finally turned against him. I left for work early that day. I wanted to think clearly. My heart no longer raced with anger. It beat steady like it had found purpose again. I walked into the office and greeted everyone as if nothing had happened. Inside, I was building my next move. Revenge was not just about hurting him. It was about ending the story on my terms. That evening, I went home before him and printed every piece of proof I had. The messages, the hotel bills, the photos. I placed them neatly inside a folder and set it on the dining table. When Daniel came home, I was waiting. I told him we needed to talk. He looked nervous but tried to act calm. I handed him the folder. He opened it and his face went pale. He whispered my name and said it was not what it looked like. I said it was exactly what it looked like. He started explaining, but I raised my hand to stop him. I told him I had spent months believing his lies. I told him I had cried myself to sleep while he smiled with someone else. I told him I was done being the quiet woman who forgives everything. His eyes filled with tears, but they meant nothing now. He begged for another chance. He said he was confused, that he loved me, that it was a mistake. I looked at him and asked how many mistakes it takes to destroy a marriage. He had no answer. I told him the lawyer already had the documents. I told him he could keep his lies, but not my life. He broke down and tried to hold my hand, but I stepped back. Then I said something that even surprised me. I told him I was not doing this to punish him. I was doing it to free myself. I had already sent the truth to everyone who needed to know. His colleagues, his family, his friends. I wanted the masks to fall so everyone could see what he had become. He shouted in anger, saying I had ruined his life. I said no, he had done that himself. I simply held up the mirror. He looked defeated. He sank into the chair and buried his face in his hands. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered the nights I had spent crying alone. The pity disappeared. I packed my suitcase that night. My clothes, my sketchbook, my camera, things that reminded me of who I was before him. He followed me to the door, asking where I would go. I said anywhere that did not smell like lies. He said I would regret it. I told him I already regretted staying too long. I walked out without looking back. The cold air hit my face like freedom. I took a deep breath and kept walking. My phone buzzed with messages from friends who had seen the photos online. Some were shocked. Some were angry for me. I did not reply. I wanted silence. I booked a small apartment across town. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. The first night I sat on the floor with a cup of tea and looked at the city lights through the window. I felt both empty and whole. Empty because I had lost the life I thought I wanted. Whole because I had found the strength I thought I never had. The next few weeks were strange. People whispered. Some avoided me. Some admired me for standing up for myself. I stopped caring about what anyone thought. I started painting again. I poured my emotions onto canvas. Each stroke was like a scar healing. Each color carried a piece of my story. One day I received an email from Claire. She said she was sorry. She said Daniel had told her that our marriage was already broken. I read her words and felt nothing. I deleted the message and went back to painting. I realized then that I had no anger left. I had used it all to rebuild myself. Daniel tried to contact me several times after that. I did not respond. I did not want explanations. I wanted peace. I learned that revenge does not always come through pain. Sometimes it comes through silence, through moving on while the other person is trapped in their guilt. A few months later, I walked past the cafe where I had once waited for him. I saw couples laughing inside, and for the first time it did not hurt. The world had moved on, and so had I. I smiled quietly. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the stars. I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the discovery, the confrontation. It all felt like a movie I had finally finished watching. I whispered to myself that justice had been served not through destruction but through truth. Truth that set me free. My new life began quietly. The first morning in my small apartment felt strange but peaceful. The sunlight through the thin curtains looked softer than before. I made coffee and sat on the floor with my sketchbook. For the first time in months, I did not check my phone. I did not wait for anyone to call. I just breathed. The silence felt like healing. Days passed slowly, but I did not rush them. I learned to enjoy simple things again. A walk to the park, a cup of tea by the window, music that reminded me of who I was before everything broke. Each moment became a small step back to myself. I started painting every day. My emotions spilled across the canvas. Pain turned into color. Anger turned into shape. One evening, while working on a new piece, I realized that I was no longer painting for distraction. I was painting to express freedom. Each brushstroke felt like a declaration that I had survived. I found a local art group and joined their weekly meetings. The people there did not know my story. They only knew me as a quiet woman who loved to paint. It was refreshing. They laughed easily and shared ideas with open hearts. I started feeling connected again. Not as Daniel's wife, not as the betrayed woman. Just as me. One day, a man named Ryan joined our group. He was kind and calm, with eyes that carried a quiet sadness. He said he was a photographer who had recently gone through his own heartbreak. We talked about art and loss and how both can change a person. His words were gentle. His presence was steady. For the first time, I felt safe talking about my pain without fear of judgment. Over time, Ryan and I became friends. We met after art sessions to walk through galleries or drink coffee by the river. He never asked too many questions. He simply listened. That was something I had forgotten people could do. Listen without trying to fix or explain. Just be there. One evening, he asked about my paintings. He said they looked powerful, like they carried secrets. I smiled and told him they were pieces of my story. He nodded and said, "Then your story deserves to be seen." He suggested we plan a small exhibition together. The idea scared me but also excited me. Weeks passed as we worked on it. He handled the photos and space arrangements. I focused on finishing my art. The night of the exhibition arrived. I stood among people who admired the paintings, not knowing they were looking at my pain turned into beauty. Ryan smiled at me from across the room. In that moment, I realized I had transformed. The woman who once felt broken was now inspiring others without even trying. After the show ended, we walked outside. The night was cool and quiet. Ryan said he was proud of me. I looked at him and said I was proud of myself too. It was the first time I had said those words out loud. It felt powerful. As months went by, I found balance. I started teaching art classes to children. Their laughter filled the studio with life. Their small hands painted without fear. Watching them reminded me how pure creativity can be, how healing it is to make something out of nothing. Daniel tried to reach out once more through an email. He said he had lost his job after everything went public. He said he wanted to meet. I read his words carefully and then closed the message. I did not reply. Some chapters are meant to remain closed. One morning, while setting up a new class, one caught my reflection in the mirror. I saw a woman who had been through fire but came out shining. My eyes looked softer but stronger. My heart no longer carried bitterness. I had replaced it with peace. Ryan and I kept seeing each other but never rushed anything. We understood that healing takes time. Some evenings we sat in silence watching the sunset. There was no need for promises, just presence. That was enough. I realized then that revenge was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. Because revenge had turned into justice, and justice had led me back to myself. One night before sleeping, I whispered that sometimes pain is not a punishment. Sometimes it is a path. The path that takes you to who you were always meant to be. Time moved gently after the exhibition. My days found rhythm again. I woke up early, painted until noon, and taught in the afternoons. The children's laughter filled the room with light. I had stopped looking over my shoulder. I had stopped feeling the ache of betrayal. It was not gone completely, but it no longer ruled me. It lived inside me like a quiet scar, reminding me of what I had survived. One afternoon, while walking through the market, I saw Daniel. He looked thinner, older, tired. He noticed me and froze. For a moment, the noise of the world around us faded. He walked closer and said my name softly. I nodded but said nothing. He asked if we could talk. I agreed because my heart no longer feared him. We sat on a bench near the park, the same park where we had once laughed together years ago. He looked at the ground when he spoke. He said he was sorry. He said he had destroyed everything with his own hands. He said he could not sleep at night because of the guilt. His voice shook. I listened quietly. There was a time when those words would have broken me, but now they did not touch me the same way. I told him I believed his regret was real, but it would not change the past. I told him I had forgiven him not for his sake but for mine. He looked up surprised. I said, "Forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about releasing the hold of pain." He nodded slowly. He said he wished me happiness. I said I already had it. Then I stood and walked away. I did not look back. The air felt lighter, as if I had finally closed the last door. That night I sat by the window painting again. I painted the park, the trees, the bench, the sunlight breaking through the branches. I added 2 figures, one walking away and one sitting in silence. It felt like a goodbye, not filled with hate, but with peace. Days turned into weeks. Ryan continued to visit the studio. He brought new ideas, new colors, new laughter. One evening, he told me he had been offered a project in another city and asked if I would consider joining him. I hesitated for a moment. Change had once scared me. Now it felt like freedom. We traveled together to the coastal city where the sky met the ocean in endless blue. We found a small place by the water. I started a new art program there for women who had lost their confidence. We called it the Second Chance. The studio became a place of healing. Each woman brought her story, her pain, her strength. We painted together and shared silence when words were too heavy. One evening after class, Ryan showed me a photo he had taken of me while I was painting. I was smiling without realizing it. He said that was the look of someone who had found peace. I looked at the photo and felt tears rise in my eyes, not of sadness but of gratitude. Sometimes at night, I thought about the past, not with anger but with understanding. Every lie, every tear, every dark day had shaped me into who I was now, strong, free. Whole. One morning, I received a message from one of the women in the program. She said the sessions had given her courage to leave a toxic relationship. She said she felt alive again. I smiled and realized that the pain I once cursed had turned into a gift. A power that could help others heal. Life had come full circle. I was no longer the woman searching for justice. I had become the woman who lived it. Justice was not about destroying someone. It was about rebuilding yourself so completely that their actions no longer defined you. That night, as I watched the ocean waves hit the shore, I whispered to myself that peace is the final revenge. To live freely while those who hurt you are trapped in their own memories. That is justice. That is strength. It has been 3 years since everything changed. Sometimes I wake up and still feel the quiet echo of my old life. The morning sunlight touches my face through the curtains, and for a second I remember the woman I used to be. The one who believed love meant sacrifice. The one who thought silence was strength. But that woman no longer exists. She was broken and then reborn. My art studio by the ocean has grown into a safe place for many. Women walk in carrying stories they are afraid to speak. I listen. I teach them to pour their pain into color, to let the brush carry what their hearts cannot say out loud. There is power in creation. There is freedom in expression. Sometimes I watch them paint and see myself in every stroke. One evening after class, a woman named Lila stayed behind. She had been quiet since she joined. That night, she told me her husband had betrayed her with her closest friend. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, she asked me how I had survived. I smiled softly and said I did not just survive. I rebuilt. I became something stronger than before. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered that she wanted to feel that too. I told her she already could. I told her revenge does not always mean hurting someone back. Sometimes it means shining so bright that their shadows can no longer reach you. After she left, I sat alone in the studio. The sound of waves outside mixed with the faint scent of paint. I thought about Daniel. I wondered if he had finally found peace too. Maybe he did. Maybe he did not. It no longer mattered. My peace was mine alone. Ryan often came by after work bringing coffee and quiet company. He understood without needing words. He once said he admired how I turned pain into purpose. I told him that was the only way to make sense of it. Pain without purpose is just suffering. Pain with purpose becomes power. We walked by the shore one night under a sky full of stars. The ocean shimmered in silver light. Ryan looked at me and said he wanted to build a future together. I looked back and smiled. I was no longer afraid of love. Because I knew love was not supposed to break you. It was supposed to grow with you. The next morning I painted a new canvas. It was simple. A woman standing at the edge of the sea, her reflection calm, her face lifted toward the horizon. In the distance, the first light of dawn touched the water. I named it Rising. Months passed and our studio expanded. More women came, more stories unfolded, more hearts healed. I felt proud but also humbled. Every time someone smiled again after weeks of tears, I felt that silent joy of knowing they had chosen to rise too. One day, I received an invitation from an art gallery in the city that once held my past. They wanted to showcase my work in an exhibition called Rebirth. I hesitated before agreeing. Going back meant facing the same streets that had once broken me. But I knew I had to go. Not for the world, but for myself. When I arrived, the city looked the same, yet it felt different. Because I was different. My paintings hung on the walls under soft golden light. People stopped to look, some whispered, some smiled. I stood there silently watching them, not as the betrayed woman, but as the creator of her own destiny. Familiar face appeared in the crowd. Daniel stood near the corner quietly. He did not approach this time. He just looked at the painting of the woman by the sea. I knew he understood. That was my closure. No words needed, no confrontation. Just truth in color. When the exhibition ended, I stepped outside. The night air was cool and full of life. The city lights reflected on the pavement like stars fallen to earth. I walked slowly through the streets, feeling a peace I had never known before. I realized that justice had never been about revenge. It had always been about reclaiming my voice, my worth, my soul. I had thought the messages on his phone had destroyed me, but they had only set me free. Now, when I tell my story, I tell it without bitterness. I tell it as a lesson. I tell women that betrayal is not the end. It is the beginning of knowing who you truly are. I still paint every morning. I still listen to the waves whispering against the shore. Sometimes I hear laughter in the distance, and it reminds me of the girl I once was. I smile because I know she is still with me, but wiser, stronger, calmer. Every life has storms, but not all storms come to destroy. Some come to clear the path for light to enter. That is what I learned. That is what I live by. And if you ask me now what revenge truly means, I will tell you this. Revenge is not shouting in anger or tearing someone down. It is walking away in silence and becoming everything they thought you could never be. As the sun sets each evening, I stand by the window with a cup of tea. The horizon glows in orange and gold. The sea keeps moving just like life, and I whisper to myself the words that once saved me. Peace is the final revenge, and I have found it.